beautiful souls, it's Tan here today with another relationship astrology video, and this is going to be the last video in our 5 stages of a relationship series, talking about the synastry of the first stage of a relationship, which is the attraction and the romance stage. So in the last few videos I've addressed different types of chemistry that you can have when you're first getting to know someone, but in this video I kind of want to talk about idealization that can happen really quickly at this phase of a relationship, because there can be attraction that happens that is considered long-term attraction, meaning that the attraction that happens in the first stage of meeting someone can last long-term. But there are some types of attraction that two people may feel for each other that actually is a deception or an illusion, and later on in the relationship this feeling that initially was very magnetic or attractive actually turns into disappointment. So that is what I want to talk about today. If you want to get a synastry chart with you and a particular love interest done, I have made a video on how to do that, links up above and in the description box below. You can cook up the synastry chart there. So the idea behind idealization is that if you see some of these indicators popping up in your synastry with a particular love interest, you want to first see how many of them there are. If there's like just one or maybe even two, then it just might create that feeling of the fantasy and things like that, and it might be okay. But if you start to see a lot of these popping up, and then you can also kind of see things like this in the composite, or maybe you see one aspect in synastry but you see one in the composite and they are similar in a way, and you want to see how close the orb is as well. If it's in an aspect, two planets are, if what I'm saying here in your chart is in a close orb, like 0 to 1 degrees orb, and in the composite it's also really close, then this is going to be the main overriding sort of theme in your relationship, and that's something to watch out for because it's going to lead to disappointments later on in the relationship. Also, if you see any of these signs popping up, one thing you might want to consider to make this relationship more realistic may be to consider talking to the people around you, friends and family, about the person that you're seeing, to get a clearer idea about what this person is really all about, and really be opening up to taking some advice in that case. The last thing I do want to mention before we talk about these indicators is the underlying reason why someone might idealize someone else. And the reason for high expectation, high idealization is coming usually from a sense of low self-esteem. And we often feel that when we don't feel so good about who we are, we don't love ourselves enough. We want somebody who seems almost perfect, because being with that person can sort of bump up our self-confidence and self-esteem, especially if we can show off that person to the people in our lives on social media. Then we'd feel better about ourselves. So in a way, we may be using the other person to boost our self-esteem because we haven't done it to ourselves. So it does, if you see these aspects showing up, it will be important to build up your own sense of self before you engage in such a relationship. It can still work. And life is about living and learning. And if you come out of a relationship very disappointed, then you may use this as a way of reflecting on what is it within yourself that you need to love more of, and how you can bump up your self-esteem. And I think that's really beautiful. The first indicator that there might be some high expectations or idealization in the relationship is when you have Pluto conjunct, square, Moon, Venus, Mars, or even Mercury of your love interest. So, I've talked about Pluto and Venus and the Moon in a lot of other types of chemistry, and sometimes, it may not be an idealization, it may be a real connection, but sometimes it may not be, in a sense that it's not an illusion. It's not that you don't see the other person clearly, but it is the high amount of expectation that you feel the other person needs to fulfill with regards to your needs, the moon, your wants, the Venus, you know, your sexual needs, Mars, you know, your ideas and perception of the world and the way you want to talk and communicate, Mercury. So both people are playing off of each other in this sense with the square and the opposition. But there's more of a tug of war, there's more of an intensity and more of a warlike battle with the square, of course. So if you have this with a particular love interest, you know, it's very important that you let each other be, and that you, like we said at the beginning, see the self-worth within yourself, so that you're not needing the other person to fulfill certain expectations, so that you can feel better about who you are. The next aspect that you might want to watch out for, and this is probably, in this video, this one is probably the least likely to lead to sense of idealization and high expectation, but it's sort of an aspect where you put your partner on a pedestal. And that is when you have your sun in your particular love interest's 10th house. The house person, in this sense, can view the sun person as having a lot of qualities that they look up to and they would like to adopt. And depending on who the sun person is, they may give into that, meaning that they may want to change the house person, or just kind of treat the house person a little bit like a doll or a puppet, where they can shape and change. And the house person, you know, the more that they engage, the more the house person admires the sun, the more the sun wants to improve the house person, and the boundaries can be crossed pretty quickly, meaning that the house person may lose their sense of identity to become like the sun person. But, you know, this does depend on a lot of other things. Like I said, this is one of the least idealized aspect, but it can lead to that. It can lead to that if the sun is making some harsher aspects with the house person's planets. Like if it squares the house person's Mars, or if it opposes the house person's Pluto, then, you know. The other aspect that you may want to watch out for with regards to idealization, high expectation, is when one person's Neptune is in a conjunction or in a square to the other person's ascendant. So, you know, the Neptune person is going to feel very vaguely attracted to the ascendant person in a way where they can't tell if they really are attracted in the right way. Do you see what I mean? Like there's a fuzziness and a strange feeling. There's something strange about the ascendant person, but yet, and it's very confusing for the Neptune person in terms of the ascendant person's physical body, the way they move, the way they dress. But the stranger the ascendant person seems, the more the Neptune feels like that strangeness they can accept and they can love. But over time, the Neptune person may realize that they just can't really, like they thought that the ascendant person's life journey, the way they act in the world, the way they dress, the way they look, wait a minute, now I'm feeling a little bit maybe creeped out by it, or now I'm feeling a little bit unattracted to it the longer the relationship goes on. But that might be okay if because this is more of that outer layer of the ascendant person, so it could be okay if this doesn't translate into some Neptune in the composite chart. The Neptune person may still, you know, feel that it is like that though the ascendant person isn't as perfect as they hoped, that they have a certain amount of compassion for them, in a sense. So another aspect that you want to see for high expectations or idealization, when one person has their Neptune conjunct the other person's Mercury, or square the other person's Mercury, or opposite the other person's Mercury. This is a feeling that the both of you have a telepathic connection, but you may not. So it can seem kind of like, I know what the other person is thinking for both of you, but you don't actually know. Because it feels so good. If you feel that your sense of self-esteem can get boosted. If this telepathic communication really exists, because in the movies and in the media and in the books, it's like a magical thing. And wow, it feels like that. And I feel so good about this relationship, and then I feel so good about myself that this does exist. So we feel way too good to really know if it really is existing there or not. So the way that you're both going to have to communicate to each other, if you have this one, is you're going to have to be crystal clear with what your needs are, with the way that with what do you mean when you say this sentence? What do you mean when you use this word with this word? To make the communication really, really clear. Otherwise, it can feel like what the other person wants and needs, and then you go about doing it, and then they feel disappointed because that's not what they were needing or wanting. The other thing I do want to mention is that if there are lots of easy Neptune aspects in the synastry, and by lots I mean maybe 3 or more, then it can even lead to that sense of high idealization and expectation. So if one person has their Neptune, let's say sextile another person's sun, they have just that one aspect, that's going to be beautiful. But if they start having that aspect sextile the other person's sun, and then it trines the other person's moon, and also trines the other person's Venus, and then it also sextiles the other person's Mars, then the relationship, well, first of all, there can be too much compassion going on here, meaning that, well, the Neptune person is going to make excuses for all of the, or a lot of the inner planet person's behaviors, to the point where when if the inner planet person crosses the boundaries, the Neptune person can still be making excuses, and the excuses that keep going on reaches a certain level where the inner planet person somehow crosses the boundaries of the Neptune person, and then the Neptune person now feels disappointed and resentment that they had made so many excuses for the inner planet person. And any other harder aspects that will be happening in the synastry or in the composite is going to be blinded by the easy Neptune aspects as well. So it's easier to play out the harder aspects, and all relationships will have some hard aspects going on. So the harder aspects can be playing out, and then the two people are not seeing that until it goes out of line, and then they're disappointed that they had allowed things to get this far, and then there's resentment and guilt and shame and that kind of a thing. So, and of course, the last thing I do want to mention here is if one person has their Neptune square to the partner's sun, moon, or Mars. Because with the conjunction and the opposition, it may not be anything real. You have to see again in the composite how it's going to play out in the relationship, but usually with the square, it's felt stronger than the opposition. Oppositions always sort of offer some kind of balance and more awareness. With the square, it's so much energy. So the energy of Neptune is illusion and delusion, and there's so much of that coming in that you know, it may not translate to the composite and it could be okay, but usually it may translate to the composite. And the Neptune person here is not seeing the identity, the sun, of the other person clearly. They think the other person is about something, but they are not. With the moon, both of the people are having this overwhelming feeling of meant to be, of a soulmate, just because of the way that Neptune heightens your senses to that higher level without any, you know, practical confirmation of what's actually going on between the two of you. And with Mars, this can play out as one person wanting to save or playing on the weaknesses of another person. But then again, with these ones, if there's just like one, like I said before, you want to see the composite to see if it translates into anything. And that might be okay there, if there's just one of these aspects or two. Guys, those are some of the things that I wanted to mention before I wrap up the synastry of the first stage of a relationship, which is the attraction and the romance stage. So to sum it up a little bit, in this stage, when you're first meeting somebody, you're gonna, you know, experience physical attraction, you're gonna experience, you know, sexual chemistry, intellectual chemistry, spiritual chemistry, and lifestyle chemistry. But, you know, all of these things, all these types of different chemistry, is something that can keep going and being maintained in a relationship. But if you feel any of the things that I mentioned in this particular video when it comes to expectations and idealization, either it may not last or it's going to mask some of the other difficulties that has the potential to occur later on in a relationship, and therefore leading to a certain amount of disappointment. So at the end of the day, we want to, you know, be aware of this, and we want to know that we can seek advice from other people to give us a sense of clarity. But ultimately, we want to turn back and have a look at what it is that we are missing, and we feel we are missing, that we need a perfect partner to fulfill for us. And trust me, I know this pretty well. I am quite a Neptunian person. I've been in such situations. And at the end of the day, we can engage in such relationships. It is not a red flag per se, these aspects, but they will allow you to experience something and learn from it. That's what we're all here to do, to learn. In the next video, I'll be talking about the composite chart of the first stage of a relationship. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button below if you haven't. If you already subscribed, then thank you very much for coming along. I do birth chart readings, synastry, and relationship readings. All the information is on my website. You can check that out. You can send me an email if you have any other questions you want to ask about my services. And yeah, have a beautiful day, beautiful souls. Bye.
La